Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Reference Recording. And today we are talking about Prokofiev's Piano Concerto No. 3, his most popular piano concerto by far, although No. 2 is kind of creeping up if you've been paying attention lately, because everyone does No. 3, and people were looking for another one, and they realized, No. 2, what a fabulous work. Actually, I think it's the greater of the two in many respects, but that's neither here nor there. We're talking about Piano Concerto No. 3. And the reference recording is quite interesting, and it tells us, again, as all of these do in their own individual way, something about the discography, how consensus forms around certain recordings, and how they get to be where they are. So the reference recording for Piano Concerto No. 3 is Martha Argerich and Claudio Abbado with the Berlin Philharmonic on Deutsche Grammophon. Now, it's rather interesting. This was recorded well before Martha Argerich became the sort of almost parody of herself that she is now, doing the same stuff over and over and over again, often not as well as the first time. This was the first time, and it was done way, 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 way back in 1967. I mean, I know a lot of you probably haven't been around that long, but I am amazed that this recording is that old. Martha Argerich is one of those performers who you somehow always think of as young, maybe because that's just the way she plays most of the time. She's lost none of her youthful vim and vigor and fire, and also because of the impression that she made as an artist, and because her repertoire wasn't huge, and recordings have been few and far between, and fewer and farther between as time went on. So, she re-recorded the third a couple of times, and usually quite well. There's no way she ruined this concerto. But the first one was amazing, and it was wonderful. But one of the reasons that it became the reference recording, let's take a step back and look at the scene as it was back in the day, in the late 1960s. Prokofiev's third was his most popular piano concerto, but it was avoided. It hadn't been recorded, at least formally recorded, by some of his great champions. Richter didn't do it, and Horowitz and Rubinstein didn't do it. It was recorded by William Capell, by Julius Katchen, by Gary Grafman. Very fine performances, most of these. Dmitri Mitropoulos did it himself. There were some really, really fine versions running around out there. John Browning was one of the best. He did it twice, actually, once for EMI, and then again, I believe, for RCA with Leinsdorf, I think both times. So, and the Browning, the first one anyway, was just marvelous. So, there were plenty of Prokofiev thirds, hopping about. But the huge named players, Claudio Arau, and they didn't do it. They didn't touch it. It was a young gun kind of piece. It really was. Steely and exciting and modern, but fresh and very, very listenable. And as I said, popular. But because it didn't have a Heifetz or a Rubinstein championing it at all times, or at least regularly and on disc, it didn't, generally speaking, have the perception that it was a great work, that it was one of the great works, that it was one of the ones that was deserving of a reference recording, because it was deserving of attention from the biggest names in the business. And that was a real issue. It was an issue until Martha Argerich got her fingers on the piece with Claudio Abbado. They were both young at the time. They were both more at the beginning of their careers than even in the middle. And they had the Berlin Philharmonic, which was at the height of its Karajan period. But of course, Karajan wasn't going to touch that concerto with a pair of tongs. Karajan was not a concerto accompanist. He really was accompanist, that's the word. He really wasn't. And so you had this great orchestra, this amazing pianist who everybody believed was one of the all-time greats, or she was headed there. She was definitely headed there. And Abbado, who was highly respected, as a young gun conductor, and they got their fingers on this concerto and also the Ravel G Major, which was the coupling, at least on CD. And they played the pants off of it. And in doing that, they actually, I think, put the piece on the map as having deserved the reference recording sweepstakes, shall we call it? Yeah, something like that. I mean, they were the cherry on the cake. Because, like I said, there were plenty of really splendid recordings of that concerto out before, this one popped up. But when it did, and it sort of swept the boards before it, people realized that here was a concerto that was part of the standard repertoire that everybody was out playing, and all the young pianists were playing it, and everybody was doing it. But no one had, it hadn't achieved that kind of status that it deserved to be considered, among the great piano concertos, at least as good as Tchaikovsky's First, for example, or the Rachmaninoff II, or something like that. And this is the performance that did that. I really believe that, because I remember, I was only 6 when it was recorded, so I don't remember when it came out, but I remember in the 70s, and I remember reading reviews and seeing the recommendations. It had already become the reference by then. And most of those other recordings, although they were very good and highly respected and referenced, reference meaning spoken of, were basically fading a little bit into the background. And the history of Prokofiev's Third Concerto really sort of falls into 2 periods, pre-Argerich and post-Argerich. Now, your recollection may be a little bit different from mine. It's entirely possible. But I do think I'm on pretty firm ground when I talk about, the history of the general reception of the work as a great work in the concerto repertoire. And then, now that it's a great work in the concerto repertoire, what's the performance of it that should be the one by which all others are judged? Doesn't have to be your favorite, again, particularly in light of what's come later. But at the time, it was an event, and it was a musical event because it became a reference recording, making the concerto itself, I think, one of the great works in the medium. So there you have it, my friends, the Prokofiev Third Piano Concerto Référence recording. Martha Argerich, Claudio Abbado, Berlin Philharmonic. It's still an amazing performance. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me, and take care.